Hello, everyone. We're going to get started. Welcome to Perrot. I'm Judy Scamato. I'm the assistant director and a little shorter than Lee, so I have to stand. Lee asked me to share the time we first met and the library first started working with Greenwich Pen Women. It was 2016, and it was the night of the Trump-Clinton debate. And
it was the Greenwich Reads Together. I was representing Greenwich Reads Together that night.
Exactly. And because it was also the debate, no one came to our book discussion. So Lee and I were sitting there and we said, well, and we got to talking and we thought, the library, this would be a great partnership, So we started a book discussion series with the Greenwich Pen Women, and it's been going strong ever since. They've done wonderful, wonderful presentations on all different types of books here. So it was fate that brought us together. So we're very happy to have Lee Paine here tonight. She's immediate past president of the Greenwich Pen Women, and she's here to discuss her book. Will there be a copy here somewhere? Extraordinary Revelations to Ordinary People. So Lee, take it away.
Thank you so much. I have to say, it is quite a challenge to come before a group of people, most of whom or all of whom I know and love, to talk about something that nobody ever talks about. An experience. Have you ever, anyone here, ever heard another human being stand up and say, I've had revelations and this is what they're like? I've heard ministers occasionally offer one of themselves, but that's just in a religious setting, but these happen in many settings. So it's an event for me, and I'm delighted to be here, and thank you so much for coming. I want to thank Perrot, of course, and the Pen Women for co-sponsoring these programs, but my deepest thanks goes really to the people, the 25 people who shared their stories in my book, because of course it wouldn't be the same thing to only read one person's experiences, but I was interested, I needed to find out more about what had happened to me, and that by one miracle after another, I met these people in extraordinary circumstances, which when you read the book, you will find I carefully noted along the way, that I was able to interview them and write them up. And it's still extremely meaningful to me. And there are people online and here who know what I'm talking about firsthand is the best way that I can put it, I think. So thanks to everyone who is here. I won't be calling on anybody tonight to give personal testimony, just so everyone can relax and know that I won't put you in the spotlight for that, because it's a very personal thing. And I recommend a safe setting where you're with one person or two people you trust. And if you get yourself to the point where you want to talk about something like this, then I congratulate you, because it's a struggle, I have to say, and here I am doing it. But I've had to practice, and I've had to practice by talking to people and say, this happened to me, so that I don't dissolve into tears, because it's a very personal and very deep experience. So I want to thank my sons, Keith, who's over here, and Tucker, who's outside, and my two granddaughters for coming to help me, and couldn't have done it without both of you. Thank you so much, and I appreciate that support. So I've written out notes because I want to move swiftly through them so that we have time for discussion and questions and comments. So I'll go quickly through what I'll be talking about, and then I'll do it. So I'm going to start with a little market research. I have some questions I'd like to ask of you. I'll do a brief introduction and overview of the book. I'll discuss briefly what it was like to write the book, because I know I have writers in the room here. It only took 5.5 years, and much of it was during COVID. However, I will talk about what I've learned since I wrote the book, or since it was published, and deliver some good news, which you might like to hear, and make an exciting announcement about publishing opportunities on my website for folks who would like to share their revelations. Then, as I said, I'll leave time for questions and comments. By the way, normally I sell the books myself for $31, and you'll find they're much more expensive on Amazon and Lulu and so forth. But because 31 is a very awkward price for cash, it's $30 tonight only. So I hope that is a benefit to some of you. So here's the marketing research. These are a few questions I'm asking because I will appreciate very much knowing the answers. I'm a curious person. I always like to know how things work and what people are thinking. So there are no right or wrong answers to this, just honest ones, please. And as I say, remember, no right or wrong. So of those of you who have read any part of the book, how many of you have read the first chapter? Ooh, thank you. I'm delighted by that. I'll tell you why later. How many of you have been reading the chapters consecutively? Wow, that's interesting too. And I'm glad, and I'll tell you why in a minute. How many of you have been picking chapters randomly? All right. And any of you, have any of you read the whole book? This is great. Yeah, you know, and as I say, what I understand fully is that this is a book that requires time. I've only had one person say I couldn't put it down, and it's usually that people say I need to stay with that story. It's with me all day long, and then I'm ready for another one, and I take that as a compliment. I asked the question about those who have started with have read the first chapter, because I've discovered that some people missing that chapter haven't seen there's some themes that emerge as you go along. And also there's an explanation of what it's like, my explanation from my revelations experience, and the confusion and the angst it caused me. And it would be important to some people to know that when they read about revelations, because what you imagine a revelation might be if you haven't had one, I think it's probably quite different than those who are in the book and I describe it. But any way that you are reading the book is the right way for you. And thank you for sharing that. So for those who haven't read the book or know very little about it, Extraordinary Revelations to Ordinary People is a book that features 25 interviews with people who have had these extraordinary revelations, which I define for the purposes of the book as an experience that comes to you from outside yourself, sears itself into your soul, and generally has a personal message for you. And it's important to get that picture in your head that this is something that surprises you. You weren't expecting it. It comes out of you don't know where. And after it happens, you don't know where either. So it's different than a dream, and I'll explain that later. But this is not a book about religion, which surprises some people, even though there can be a religious overlay, which I will talk about in a little bit. It's a book about people who've had these revelations and how they interpret them. And that is the part that interests me the most, because these are very personal messages. So far, I haven't had any people say, I had a message about the world. It's always about something about you, your family, your life, that relates to you. So far, someone may prove that I need to expand my definition. But most of all, it's not dream interpretation. I had a very interesting experience on Saturday, talking to a neighbor, wonderful people, I love them both, and the wife is very spiritual and understands very much what I'm talking about, but her husband had not been party to this conversation. And I mentioned this book signing, and he was interested. He said, "What's it about?" And I started to explain what it was. He said, "Oh, that's dream interpretation." He starts to tell me how to interpret what happened to me, and his wife is going, "No, no, no, don't say that, don't say that." I understand the urge to do that because we're all taught dream interpretation on some level. Everybody has a concept of it, and it's what I would call common knowledge. And whatever you think of it, we accept it generally. But this is not that, and it doesn't apply because dream interpretation depends on something that is going on in your psyche, and those who have a better word for it, correct me, please, and emerges in some way. But this is an experience, in my particular case, that is not related to anything I've ever thought about, and at least 2 or 3 of these experiences didn't even know about, and I'll say more about that later. But these all seem to be involved with the senses, which is really interesting. So people hear things, they see things, they feel things. I was touched once at a very interesting time, and I knew that this was not a neck prick or anything else like that. It was a touch unlike any I've ever felt. And smell, but taste is the only one that I haven't had any kind of input on. But when it happens in real time. Most people are awake. Occasionally it's a dream, but the dreams are unlike any dream that you've ever had. And you can replay the tape. All these years later, I can look at what happened in that dream and feel every second of it, see every second of it. So, as I say, dream interpretation doesn't apply. The kinds of revelations that are in the book, and there may be more, visions, often of religious figures, including saints and angels, déjà vu, souls departing, near-death and after-death experiences, religious conversions, meaningful signs, which I will illustrate in a few minutes, hearing God's voice, and visible forms of evil, which surprised me. There was more than one person reporting having witnessed evil. And so I must include that too. It all boils down to this, I think, in terms of what you experience when you have one of these. It all boils down to who you are at the time it happens to you, because it challenges everything that you know. Most people doubt themselves. How can you see a vision? In my case, I saw a vision of Jesus. I was lying in bed, and it was early in the morning. I was awake. I knew what time it was. I was waiting for my children to wake up for school. I was looking at the light coming in the window, watching on the wallpaper, and then I see up over the closet doors, it was an old house with very high ceilings, big oval, the face of a very young man in it. The most beautiful bronze skin I'd ever seen, very, very long face, and bronze-colored hair and bronze-colored eyes, very serious. He's looking down right at me, eye into eye, and I knew it was Jesus. And the message that was communicated was, everything's going to be all right. And then he was gone. And my first response, and this is the telling part, my first response was, oh, he must have made a mistake. You know what? And I thought, maybe he didn't. And my second thought was, it's in the book, and I can't think of it at the moment, but my third thought was, if God is God, why didn't God send me someone who I would better understand? And the reason I thought that is that I was raised a Unitarian. Unitarians believe in one God. Jesus is one prophet among many. And it was, to me, a barrier. And I was resentful about that for quite a while, because I believe Jesus came to me at that time because my brother, who was 43 years old, had been a quadriplegic since he was 18, was dying in a hospital. I had just seen him, and I knew that death was imminent, but the hospital was not treating him for pain medication because he was swelling and swelling and swelling up, because there'd been a mercy killing in the hospital prior to that, a few weeks before, and the hospital was being watched very carefully. So I was very angry about that. I didn't understand it. So then this vision comes to me, and then I don't understand the messenger. I got the message, but it didn't have the effect anyone would have wanted. So sometimes revelations come and give certain people answers, and sometimes they come and confuse you. So it's just, I can't explain why, and I can't explain who, but that's, I think, what happens. And it tests who you are and what you're thinking at the moment. And you have to start to sort these things out. So, in terms of how what it's helpful to know about the people in the book and how the book came about, I asked each subject in the book to fill out a survey that I made up myself because, as I said, I'm curious. I want to know how things happen and how various people think about things, and that's why I needed to speak to other people. And I was looking for commonalities in their background, and I was thinking all the way through this, I was thinking after that experience, if I had been Catholic, how would I have responded to seeing Jesus? I can only imagine that I'd have been on my knees and totally overwhelmed and so grateful. And I wasn't feeling that. And of course, then you feel guilty as well. It's because since that time, I had started going to First Church in Old Greenwich, actually, and they talk about Jesus there and accept him as a savior. And I wasn't quite on that ship, but I was in process, and I've been in process ever since and learned a great deal. But the surveys helped me, and I use them in the introduction to the book. And so when you read the book, you'll find that there are various things. I introduce what I think is important to your understanding of that person's story, and I found it very, very helpful. You'll also see the way that I met each of these subjects, and it only gets crazier and crazier and crazier. One coincidence after another, until I don't even know what the word would be for something that's so coincidental that it's just unbelievable. And you'll find some of those. The bottom line is, I know I've been getting help. I have been led and I've been pushed, and it's still happening. I've got an example here with me tonight, this very day. I don't know how and why this is happening, but here I am talking about it. I'm not a person who would go into a closet and sit and think about it and pray about it. I pray all the time. In a way, I have a constant conversation going on. That's just who I am. And I don't understand all things, but I have a very busy life and a good life. I sing in 3 different groups. I have a lot of challenges to meet. I'm busy, and if God wanted someone who was going to be immediately converted or molded into something else, then I wouldn't have been picked. So I have been picked, and I can only assume that there's a reason for it. But I also think if it's an angel helping me, the angel reports to God and says, she doesn't get it. She just doesn't get it. With one incident after another going along with these, trying to explain to God why this person hasn't perhaps become something else, But I think the point is, and it's why the book is called Extraordinary Revelations to Ordinary People, that I am indeed an ordinary person. And that gives me a lot of confidence to keep going, because there doesn't seem to be a point at which it cut off because I did something that wasn't desired. And here I am tonight. I think I'm doing the right thing by sharing this. So I just keep marching ahead. And that's the way it is. But sometimes a religious interpretation does overlap, even though I'm very careful to say it's not a book about religion. In my case, it has overlapped, because I not only had the vision of Jesus, but I had someone come to me who offered me the chance to live or die, and I didn't have a clue who she was. She was in a medieval costume, and I didn't find out until 27 years later that it was Saint Teresa of Avila. And I heard it from Bishop Caggiano's lips when he was talking to a confirmation class at St. John's up in Darien, where I was a paid singer in this Catholic church for 18 years. And on October 15th, 2019, he said, "Who knows what today is?" And I think, "What's my birthday?" But nobody here knows that. And I'm chuckling to myself. And then he went on to describe this saint who was in the Middle Ages and so forth. And during the vision that I had of her, my entire concentration was on this gigantic cone hat that she had on her head. And here she was about to offer me the choice to live or die. And I'm thinking, how is that hat staying on her head? That's who's talking to you. So that's just the way it is. So yes, there is a religious interpretation to some of these, but not to all. And many people in the book who I might have expected, who perhaps even describe themselves as devout Catholics, chose to describe their experiences as spiritual rather than religious. So that is something I want to continue to explore as well. My interest in writing this book was really to understand more about my own revelations, but also to talk to as many people as I could of all different backgrounds and descriptions, because I think there's something to be learned from every single person. I've always thought this. Before any of this happened to me, I had the philosophy that the way to get closer to God, and I always did believe in God, is for as long as I can remember, would be to listen to what other people have to say. Everyone has a story. Everyone has experience. And if we could gather all those experiences in some way, we would know more about God. And I guess that's one way in which I'm sort of being tested to try and gather this information. But I really believe that very strongly, and I am interested in listening and hearing, talking to as many people as I hope will come forward, which has become my mission. And I will talk more about that in a minute. But first, I wanted to just say a little bit about what it was like to write a book, mostly during COVID. It was horrible. What else can I say? Tough is a better word, probably. I did do some interviewing before, and I did that with a little tape cassette, which I then sat and transcribed for hours sitting at the computer. And then I would do an edit and send it off to the person, and they would send it back, and I would send it back to them. It would go back and forth, because what I was recording was somebody talking to me about one of the deepest experiences in their lives. And when you do that, you connect to your emotions, and you choke up, you may cry, you can hear my voice. It goes so deep that it's very difficult to talk about. And most of these people are professionals in their own fields, but certainly all are well educated. And for them to then see what I have transcribed, and I try to do it as delicately as possible, but it's important to leave the language that they're using, because it's emotional language, and not upscale it to a doctoral dissertation. And with a couple people, I know that was very difficult for them because they're published writers. And here they have revealed themselves, and then they see the emotion on the paper. Very, very tough. But took a year with one person. But I'd say I did about 5 edits per person as an average, which would be like 150 edits, which is part of why it took 5.5 years. But not a minute of it was wasted, because I believe it helped everyone come around to beginning to own their experience. And that's one of the things that's most difficult to do. You've had it, most haven't ever talked about it, but to then step forward and own it is another whole thing. And I think that editing process helped with that. So I'm grateful for them for sticking with me. And I'm grateful too that a lot of people have said to me who have read the book, every voice is totally distinct. I can hear so-and-so in that story. And I think, thank you. That is better for me, the biggest compliment that anyone can give, that the people are represented as they wish to be represented. So I'm also grateful for the bonding that took place between all of the people and me. I feel each one has a unique place in my life, and I'm so grateful to them. I've said that. I can't say it enough. I'd say it 1,000 times if it would make any difference. But I feel bonded to these people. You can't go through an experience like that together and not have some part of them in you. Most of them didn't even know any of my stories. Occasionally I told one, which I think you will see in the book. So connecting on some point of their story with something in my stories. But what brought me some of the most joy in getting the book out was delivering the book to people in the book, so that they could see who else in the book related to them in a way. In other words, there are stories. If you read the first chapter and you went consecutively, you began to see themes coming out, that there are parents who come back to speak to their children. There are near-death and after-death experiences. There are all kinds of experiences. And when you've had one of those and you've never talked to anybody about it, to be in a book and then find somebody else in the book, this gave me joy, because I know it gives support and help to those people. So I'm very happy about that. And I think there is good news that comes out of this book. It's an intimidating subject. I understand that, particularly for people who have not experienced it. I can only say that I understand if you don't, because I can hear as I speak, as I say these stories, as I acknowledge what's happened to me, I can hear how insane I sound to somebody who has not had this experience. I understand. The difference is that now I'm old enough not to care. So there is something wonderful about aging. If you think I'm crazy, you may be right, but that's okay. Something good has come out of it. But there is other good news in the book, and it's most of the messages in the book. I would say most of the messages imparted in the Revelations had some sort of good news. I think to those who had a family member come back to them, these were wonderful. These were joyful. And the message was generally, I'm okay, I'm doing well. And that can mean more than anything to them. And I'm so happy for them that happened for them. Also, I'm sorry that I lost my place here. Okay. Other testimonies besides those that have a message that lifts you up suggest that we're being watched and helped and even guided as individuals by family members who have gone on ahead of us. That was a new concept to me, and I want to acknowledge Chip White, who's I think the 4th chapter in the book, who has died since my interviews. And I really miss him because he is the first to tell me the stories that were kind of earth-shaking. He'd had a brother die who committed suicide, and at the time that I was interviewing him, was right there with him, and was with him almost all the time. And he had many other stories. I said to him right on, "You've got a book, you need to write this book." And he chose to share some with me, for which I'm grateful because they are represented, and he didn't get to write the book. But he's in my acknowledgments, and it's important, certainly. But that idea began to expand when other people in the book began to have common themes, or themes sort of like it, that family members perhaps are helping us and we're unaware of it. And finally I got to the point where I decided to look back at my life from that perspective. What if I believed that the events that happened in my life, and there were some biggies, and everyone in this room has had biggies, I know that. What if I believed that I was helped through those serious events and was led on to something better? There are times when things happen in your life that you can be very angry about, and you don't understand, and you carry a lot of stuff with you. But sometimes it was for a good reason. And sometimes you last long enough to be able to see and understand there's some very good things that can happen when partings come and other kinds of things. And so I thought, well, if I look back at that and take that point of view, what if I believed or even chose to think that I have been helped on my path, I'm watched over and helped by family members in the past? How would that change how I look at my whole life? And it was quite beautiful. It was like, wow, if that's been going on and I've been missing it, I want a piece of that. And I really want to acknowledge it. And I was thinking that if anyone in the audience asked me tonight, since I've had two angels come to me, and some other things, if somebody said to me, "Who do you think was that angel?" I was having a lot of trouble. I'm really wondering about it. So then I put it aside because I had to finish writing this, and I had to feed the dog and all these other things. And then not too long before I came here, but it was probably about 4:30, I guess it was, I was feeding the dog, getting him ready, and I was looking for a button for something. And I went into my button drawer, which has, do you have a button drawer? So you know what I'm talking about here. Once every 6 years, I look in it. And I was fishing around, and I came up with something that just suddenly was there. This is a hand-typed note by my grandfather, who is my mother's adoptive father, that he did on a typewriter that was one of the very first. You know, the ones that they had fingers that came up and went smack on the paper like this. Have you ever seen one of those? That's what he wrote on all the time. And it was for a birthday. It says, "Dear Mary Lee," my first name is Mary Lee. "As I did last year, I am leaving the choice of a birthday gift to your own personal discretion." I must have been about 10, I think. "Buy something that will please you, for my sole wish is to amplify the day's pleasure and enjoyment. Boss." We called him the boss, or boss. And then at the top, the sticker, "Kindness. I shall pass through this world but once." This is hard, sorry. "If therefore there be any kindness I can show," you know this one, "or do a good thing I can do, let me do it now. Let me not defer it or neglect it, for I shall not pass this way again." And that really just hit me there. Today, 4:30. And we wonder if there are signs and so forth. And here is the sign, which I was going to talk about next. So several of the testimonies tell us to look for signs. This says more than anything. I doubted it when I first heard it. Several people have testimonies to the effect of some even picking up coins and other kinds of things. But I have to say, I've been drawn to the side that now says, you know what? Some signs are more obvious than others, but that this emerged today when I was asking myself the question, who would I say maybe has been guiding me? Okay, I think I've got an answer, and it's a beautiful answer, and I'm very grateful. So now about my mission. My mission is to lift up this topic of extraordinary revelations into the light and help those who have had these experiences begin to accept and know them, which I mentioned before. And if possible, this is a lofty goal, prove that millions of ordinary people have these experiences. Because the more numbers I gather, the more this will be a topic of conversation, the more people can feel comfortable to begin to talk about it, maybe in their church or synagogue, maybe to their families. Keith, did I ever talk to you about this? No. No, I'm teaching myself as I go along. And I'm glad you're smiling, thank you. Because we have a long way to go in regards of this mission. So I'm hoping for that, and to further the mission, I commissioned/created a new website, www.leepainewriter.com, and I have cards out on the table there, a ton of them. And what I'm offering on that website is it's an invitation for anybody who's had a revelation that they feel matches my description of it to come to the website. You don't need to have read the book, and take a survey that's there. It's kind of like the survey that the people took who are in the book, and fill it out, and I'm looking for numbers. And the more numbers I get, the more information I will have. So I have a blog attached to that. So as I get more numbers, some of the questions are, what kind of experience have you had? Did you see a vision? Did you, all of these different kinds? I'd be very curious to know what most people will choose. And you can choose several, you can choose more than one. But that will inform my blog. And I will be very happy to have you take as many cards as you know people who you can give them to, your grandmother, your child, whoever that you feel would be interested, or carry some in your pocket to get people coming to the website. And then my announcement, which is brand new, is that because since the time the book was published and now, I have had, I'd say 75 people tell me stories. I have not been going around asking for them, but the word is out, and just dog walking. There's several dog walkers in this group. And far more people than I would have expected have had these experiences. And I'm interested in them. And a couple people asked me if I was going to write a second book, and I was having trouble because with that, I mean, I've got boxes to sell first, you know, and other things I might like to do. But I realized that this is part of my mission, is to encourage people to share their stories. So there's going to be another section on the website which will say Readers' Revelations. It will be a curated site. Not everybody who signs up will be on there, and it's limited words. But I will probably select ones that have common themes or similar themes so people can compare them, and I'll keep it going. And if you would like to be part of this, then I have a sign-up sheet, which I think I need to put out on the table there, giving me permission to contact you by email to keep you abreast of when new things are coming out. But I'm excited about that, and I think it's one more way that I can serve this mission. So I really ask one thing of you, and that is, if you've read the book, would you please post reviews somewhere for me? I haven't been asking it, but I think it's a good time to do it. And you notice there are no reviews on the back of the book because I didn't feel it was appropriate. I wanted people to come to the book for reasons other than my paying somebody to do a review, which is most often what you see. But I would appreciate your reviews, and that would be on lulu.com, Amazon, and I think I'm also on Walmart. I don't know how I got there, but I'm there. or any other place that you would like to leave them. So now I would like to turn this over to all of you, and this will include those people who have come on Zoom, and thank you so much for coming by Zoom. For questions, comments, whatever you'd like. Question?
So you can send in your surveys, did you ask demographics? In other words, background, like,
I did.
Where do you live, or, what kind of community, or?
No, not that. It was more, at the time that I made it, I assumed that more of these would be religious experiences. So I asked religious background, what background, or were you raised in a religious background? If so, which one? And are you now practicing that, or are you somewhere else with it? I was interested in that because when I worked at the Riverside Church in New York, this was in the 90s, I went there with Brenda Stiers, who some of you will know. She was the executive minister, and the church had had a huge staff cut. And so I went there as her executive assistant, and very shortly thereafter, Dr. Forbes, James A. Forbes Jr., who was the senior pastor of the church, came in and sat down and talked with me for about 3 hours, and I totally blanked out because his first question to me was, the only thing you have to say to join the Riverside Church is, I believe in Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. And then he asked me to comment on that. And you know my history. So, but he was very interesting questions, and I can't repeat a single one of them. And then shortly after that, he asked me to be in charge of membership at the time, because usually a minister is, but they didn't have enough ministers to do it. And so I was to interview each person who came in interested in joining the church, and then assign them to one of the ministers that seemed to be the right one. I did that for about a year. And what I saw was a great crossing of people in that particular church, which is liberal and on the Upper West Side, of people moving from perhaps Judaism through to a church like Riverside, Catholics coming the other way. I actually interviewed a priest who had been excommunicated, and that was a very interesting thing too. So I realized that not everybody goes to a church and stays there, but as their lives, as they grow, they change, they have family, they move, that people move in their religious spectrums. And so that's why I asked those questions, because I was interested to see if there was some connection. So that was a great question. Do we have a question online? Yes.
Yes, we do. We have a question from Phyllis. She's asking, did it help when your brother died that everything will be okay?
That is a good question. I did not fully receive the comfort that was in that message because I got hung up on why Jesus came to me and why God didn't send me someone I would better understand. It's a sad answer, but it's the truth. Other questions? Yes.
Who do you think you would have better understood?
And I can't answer that one. And it's a great question. Fortunately, someone else in the book has that same angry, has carried that same kind of angry feeling with him, and it helped me enormously that I wasn't the only person who got hung up on all the wrong things. I assume they're wrong. More questions?
Well, I do have one other question.
Sure.
So, you said this wasn't religious, and yet there's a lot of reference to God and Jesus and things like that. So, doesn't it have a religious aspect to that?
Well, as I said, there is a religious overlay to many of these stories, but the last story in the book is someone who had an after-death experience. And she is not a believer, and she had the most beautiful experience you can imagine. And it's a very moving experience. And if that were what the end offers, I would be happy with that. And so there's a whole range there of what people believe, don't believe, but of these revelations that come to us and bring new understandings. Anyone else? Yes.
This is my question.
Yes.
Do you think that the average person actually has a revelation, but most people don't realize it or believe it?
I think when you have a revelation, you know you've had a revelation. I think, it's people, we use the word revelation to mean like, aha, and we all have those. This is a different level, and you never forget what elevates it, I think, to this level and the difference. But it's a good question. Anybody else? Yes.
I have one. You speak primarily, as I sense it, with an overlay of religion, but I'm just curious as to what examples you might cite, and I don't mean to preempt the book and reading it, about an example of a revelation which really has no religious context as we might picture it traditionally.
Well,
What sort of revelation?
I think that after-death experience falls into that category because she has no religious perception of it. She experienced a journey, and it's a very beautiful description of the way it ends, but it's not a God experience. It's not a religious experience. It is connected entirely to nature and the universe, the way she perceives it. And she thinks we're all connected, that we go back to a place where there is light. We come from a place where there is light and we return to it, where we are known completely and utterly. What a beautiful concept, So that is the biggest example that I can offer to you, but there are other stories as well. Keith?
I had a question. So the more we talk about this, the more universal it seems that this is something that crosses all ethnic and religious boundaries. If it is universal, I wonder what you would say are the biggest limiting factors in terms of people sharing their experiences.
I hope there are none. I hope there are none, and that's why I want to make it as obvious as I can that I want to listen to everybody. The fact that these things have happened to me, but that I was so confused about them and didn't understand them and still can't explain why a saint came to me when I didn't believe it. I didn't even know what a saint was, so I'm open. Yes, another question. Anybody else? Yes, Kathy.
I just wanted to make a comment, Lee, that I think the addition of the photographs, I hope that people really pay attention to those and spend some time with them. I think there is so much that is shared even just through your photographs.
Thank you.
I can imagine it must have taken you quite some time to select which of your probably millions of photographs to put on which pages, but I just think it really makes this a work of art in addition to completing your mission, or at least starting your mission, which is a really important one.
Well, I thank you for that very much, and I'll have to say that, like the rest of the book, I had no idea when I started where I was going. Even halfway through, I thought it was, and the last 7 stories, I said, thank you for the last story in the book, and then someone else came, like 7 times. This was about 6 months before the book was going to go to press, and it was in February that would be 2 years ago now. There was a light coming in because I lived next to the woods, and there were no leaves on the trees. Light coming in on a dining room table. I set up something is I just wanted to get away from the writing part of it, and I set up a little studio with some reflective aluminum sheets I have, and I threw some stuff on the table, including a sheet of the art foam that had a surface on it, like you see kids' notebooks with the little squares that reflect all over the place. Threw that on the table, and I was thinking, what am I going to photograph? And I look and I see these colors on the table reflecting it, and I'm like, oh, this is strange. And then I saw the celestial a little bit and moved around, and celestial sun set. And then I didn't know quite what came up with the picture of the saint, of Teresa, was in here. You'll see that. And I was just overwhelmed. I haven't tried any of this again. You get pushed by something like that. I was just awestruck, and I just kept going. And then I thought, well, Pat obviously is supposed to be in the book. And then the rest, most of these are current. The one with the twisting storm cloud, took that in August when we went to the beach, remember? We went with the kids to Island Beach. I took that day. And then there were other cloud photos that I've been taking for years. Never had any idea why I was doing that. And then I went and chose those, and suddenly I had photographs in the book. My publisher's like, what? So there it is. So I want to thank everyone who came today, and I will be doing a book signing out here. I send blessings to all of you, everybody online, everybody here, because we all need blessings. And I think that somehow I've been given a little power to send them. So thank you very much.